Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in The Stream. We know our community is all over the world, but chances are you know or have heard of an American singer named Dolly Parton. She's peak pop culture all over again. The 73-year-old superstar is the subject of a popular podcast, a Netflix series, and has a #1 song on the dance charts. Impressive achievements for anyone, but particularly for an artist who has been performing for more than half a century. So what keeps her relevant? Dolly Parton's America sets out to understand that.
America from a Dolly's eye view is this quivering mass of irreconcilable contradictions.
I'm gonna be both. I'm gonna be adored by church ladies and the gays.
Yeah, the sexuality, the spirituality, the sensuality, that's exactly who I am.
She's just a beautiful fountain of goodness.
It's me.
100% Dolly is an extractive capitalist.
I always say I give God the credit, I just want the cash.
In terms of cultural power, I think she's like second to Walt Disney.
This is Jad Abumurad from Radio Lab and More Perfect. For the last 2 years, I've been following Dolly Parton around the world. Trying to figure out who she is.
You'd be surprised to know who I am.
That's why we're here. We're trying to find out.
I know, but you're never going to find everything out. I'm a mystery to myself.
I'm trying to answer the seemingly simple question, what is Dolly Parton's America?
Well,
Listen to Dolly Parton's America on Apple Podcasts.
2 years with Dolly. I know a lot of people in our community might be a little jealous, and that's because our community includes many Dolly fans. And so we want to hear from you at home. Join us on Twitter or in our live YouTube chat, and I'll bring your comments in as best I can into our discussion. Welcome everyone to this stream. It is so good to have you all here. We're joined now from New York by Jad Abumurad, creator of Radio Lab, More Perfect, and host of Dolly Parton's America from WNYC Studios and OSM Audio. Shima Oliaee is also producer and reporter for Radio Lab and Dolly Parton's America from WNYC Studios and OSM Audio. And in California, Helen Morales is the author of Pilgrimage to Dollywood and a classicist and cultural critic. Well, Jad, I want to start with you because you spoke a lot in the podcast of finding connections through Dolly. And in one episode in particular, it's called Neon Moss, you shared a really special conversation with your father and Dolly. And I want our audience to have listened to this clip.
Sitting on the front porch on a summer afternoon, in a straight back chair on 2 legs, leaned against the wall.
How much of this do you talk about with Dolly?
We talk about it.
Well, family is everything to both of us, but he's very open with me about his family and about the old ways back home, and just the fact that we're just 2 people from different parts of the world, but there's a lot of similarities in our personalities.
We're both the same. When she talks, I have never visited her Tennessee home. And when she talks about it as if it is as important as any religious sanctuary that any human being can have. And I can understand that.
2 people that couldn't be more different, that we are so similar in so many ways that it's fascinating to us.
And there's something similar there?
There is, and we talk about that. I can't explain it. It doesn't even need to be explained. It's just like how you meet people in your lives, you just click, you just feel like you know them. There's just some things that, you just can't explain it. You just be it, you just live it, you just know it, and you just feel it.
So Jad, we have your father to thank in part for the reason that the world has this podcast. Give us that brief explanation for how that came to be.
Yeah, this is one of the sort of surprising. It's funny to hear that clip because it's fun. It's like to have Dolly Parton, this global star, explain your dad to you is a strange and weird situation. But the whole reason that this podcast came about, there are many reasons, but one of the principal ones is that in about 2013, Dolly got into a minor car accident in Nashville, where I grew up and where my dad still lives. He's a doctor. He ends up randomly being one of the people who treats her when she's taken to the hospital. And they become friends over the course of the years. And, he was initially her doctor, and then he just became her pal. And as I was getting curious about her, I basically called my dad and was like, Dad, can I get an introduction? So it was like nepotism is what we have to thank for this podcast. But what was unexpected to me was that to see how much their stories mirror each other. Her story of coming down the mountain, I didn't expect to be so similar to his story of coming down the mountain. They're from very different worlds, and that was really interesting to me, and that's something we explore on the podcast.
So I want to share this tweet we got from Julius, who says, I appreciate the podcast's intimate format and one-on-one conversations with Dolly herself. It's like she's reading you stories every time you tune in. Dedicating each weekly episode to a specific topic allows for more centered conversations as well. So Shima, I'll bring you in here on this one because I know you're the producer of this, so that means you have been mired in research and autobiographies and videos. Talk to us about that process and what led to this format, the format that Julius on Twitter likes so much.
I think that the audience probably has the same experience that Jad and I had in looking into this, in looking into Dolly and discovering her. Everything was kind of a surprise, and we just started with the autobiography and the first interview, and we knew everything that she had written about her life. All those stories that Jad tells her in the Tennessee Mountain Home episode. She has all of those already written and recorded on an audiobook. So we knew she was this larger than life figure. But then when we found other people that were thinking about her, like Helen, who's here today, and also this small class at UT Knoxville called Dolly Parton's America, I think that was the first big moment after Jad's first interview with Dolly herself, where we thought we had touched something that we were not expecting, and we had found something profound. And basically, we're in this classroom. This episode's coming up, so I'm not going to share too much. But the kids they're all from Appalachia, where Dolly's from, and they started sharing really personal stories that were very painful. And I think it changed Jad and I, in the room, listening to them. Like, we couldn't see Dolly's America clearly until we met the kids from Appalachia and who were really thinking about her and feeling her, like both in pain and in pride. And what it means to be a kid from the South. Yeah,
just to jump in, I think Shima's absolutely right. And it's also, just to nod to Helen, what I hope this podcast is it's part of a new wave of Dollyologists, people who are like thinking really seriously about Dolly and taking her seriously, because she hasn't been.
Is that a term that you made up? Is that a real term?
Well, it was a term that I first applied to Helen, because I think she is the first Dollyologist, to my knowledge, the first person to really sort of talk seriously about Dolly, and to to think about what does she mean to America, what does she mean to our culture, and we sort of are following in her footsteps, really.
So Helen, you got to. Helen has to pick up from there. You are the Dollyologist. Talk to us about what that means to you.
That's the greatest honor that I will ever be given. So, but I think one of the fantastic things about the podcast is that it goes beyond Dolly Parton's America. So one of the things that really touched me about the episode that was released today was listening to the freedom fighter Tokyo Sasquale, who was imprisoned in South Africa during the time of apartheid, with Nelson Mandela, talking about when the guards allowed them to play music, they played Dolly Parton.
So Helen, I'm going to pause you there, just because one, I don't want to spoil it for our audience, but I love the theme. I love that you brought it up, because I want to share a little clip with them. And I think it doesn't spoil the episode, but in the latest episode of the podcast, was released today, Tuesday, you guys go deep into the lyrics of perhaps one of Dolly Parton's most popular songs, which is Jolene. And Shima, you took the lead on this one, it seems. There was one connection to the song that struck our team, being a show with a global audience. So I want to share that, what you were just referring to, Helen. Have a look.
Yeah, do you remember one of the Dolly songs that you heard Nelson Mandela play?
He loved Jolene.
Oh, wow.
He loved Jolene.
I just think about a night at Robben Island in the dark when Jolene is playing over the loudspeakers. The prisoners hear it in their cells. On the other side of the wall, the guards are listening too. And both groups of people are having the same experience.
No human being cannot be affected by Jolene.
According to Tokyo, this song is not about love, like Nadine would say. It's about fear of someone taking your man, of losing everything. The prisoners feel that because they've lost their freedom, and the guards feel that because their country's changing and they can sense they're about to lose power. Both are feeling the same fear, but for very different reasons.
So Helen, I'm going to give that one back to you, but first I want to share this because the idea and the theme behind that is that there's a global reach here. It reached all the way to South Africa, so I want to share a couple of comments from around the world. Two from YouTube. This first one is Frida. She says, "This is my favorite woman we're talking about. I'm coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya." Another person writes in, also on YouTube, Odley says, "I'm live to you from Nigeria. She is the best songwriter woman in the world, very talented." And then one more, Nayamago says she's an icon and a music legend that's placed permanent marks into the hearts of millions across the globe. And he is writing us from Doha, Qatar. So Helen, I will give it back to you to finish your anecdote about why that was special to you.
Yeah, well, it's so wonderful to be in contact with Dolly fans from around the world. And like the last tweeter, I first became a fan when I was a teenager, and partly because I was, fat, queer teen with no dress sense, and Dolly Parton seemed to embrace what people can now call being extra, right? And partly because my dad, who was a Greek Cypriot immigrant to England, said this is our music, by which he meant this is immigrant music. And I think that's part of her global appeal. Is the fact that the things like the concentration on being nostalgic for home, common values of family and love and displacement, but done often from a radical perspective that takes into account women's perspectives when maybe they haven't been taken into account.
Jad is nodding there as you're speaking. Jad, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking I'm sort of just agreeing with what Helen just said. I mean, for me, Dolly is such an interesting combination. She's sort of a paradoxical blend of this deep longing for the place that she grew up, and she kind of carries it with her, and she tells these stories of her home. And to sit with her in an interview as she tells you these stories, I mean, it's transporting. Like it's almost like the images appear in front of you. She's an incredible storyteller, and you can tell she really time travels, space travels when she tells those stories. So there's a part of her that's backwards looking, that's always kind of bringing that with her. But there's also a part of her that's relentlessly on the go, forward marching, expanding into new places. She's seen as a very progressive figure in a lot of places. So she's got this kind of like duality to her, which I think speaks to a lot of people like Helen and Helen's dad, and certainly to my dad, where you're leaving a war-torn place in the case of my family. You're trying to make
Lebanon
a new life.
at the time, because I don't think our audience might know, right? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and you want to take something from that place, but you also feel like you can't because you're in a new place, and you can't be upfront about it. You can't be outspoken about it. So somehow Dolly captures. She is like this interesting place to stand for people who've gone through that, and that was something I didn't expect until we started doing these interviews, to see just how global her reach is, how much she speaks across cultures.
You mentioned the progressive ideas behind some of her lyrics, and I wanted to share one that many people would point to along those lines. So Dolly Parton is nonpartisan, and as repeatedly said, she is not a feminist, though in your podcast she qualifies what feminism means to her. But our colleagues at AJ Plus went into the record and into the movie 9 to 5. You knew I was going there, and they came to a different conclusion. So take a look.
So it's in that context that the film 9 to 5 comes out. It mixes two of the largest movements of the previous 20 years and uses comedy to make a radical point about workers' rights and sexual harassment in a way that's palatable and not preachy. I mean, think of it this way. 3 female workers feeling detached from their labor and suffering abuse from their boss overthrow him and introduce reforms that benefit both men and women equally. The film may as well be called Full Communism Now. Now, that's the film. What about Parton's song? In the same way the film 9 to 5 is a worker's homage to her sweat and toil, as well as her revolt, the song 9 to 5 is her lament, but also her hope.
So everyone's heads were bopping along when 9 to 5 finally started playing. Shima, take us through that conversation, the feminist conversation, the progressive politics. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think, asking Dolly about feminism led us to Grandma Betty. And a lot of the episodes take us to someone who actually lives in America or in the world that embodies something that we're trying to understand about Dolly's image or take on an idea that's very prevalent in our present day. And when we met with Grandma Betty and saw how she heard about her life story and saw how she lived and who she was, but that she would never use the word feminist, it helped, I think, it helped me understand that it helped me see her in a way that I couldn't understand why someone wouldn't say that they were feminist. And it helped me understand a history. It helped me understand a generation. It helped me understand more deeply about what it means to just survive and live something. And she didn't have the space to just use a label. And Dolly is not about labels at all. I think she understands that labels have been used to divide people. And she's kind of not only the great observer in her songs, but she's the great connector. She is connected through time. She's connected through geography. And if you ask her about it critically, like, Dolly, what are you doing? Come on, you wrote 9 to 5. What is, she doesn't want to analyze it. She's just like, this was the truth I lived, and you watched me live it. And this is the truth I live to this day.
So Shima, did you ask her about the Dixie Stampede when you interviewed her?
We did, yeah.
That's a future episode.
But for our audience, Helen, just give a one-liner on why you're asking about that. Tell our audience what that is.
Because it's really difficult as such a big fan to be critical in any way. But if we're thinking about Dolly and progressive politics, the Dixie Stampede, which is now called Dolly Parton Stampede, is a dinner attraction near Dollywood in Tennessee that used to recreate in a fun way the Civil War. And that's a really odd sentence to say. And it was a very odd experience and quite an alienating experience. And it's changed a bit. It's now a fun regional rivalry, a long-standing regional rivalry between North and South, with the explicit references to the Civil War taken out. But it's it's something that maybe doesn't quite fit with the inclusive, progressive aspects of Dolly Parton that you've been so right to stress.
I pulled it up on my screen here, dpstampede.com. America's #1 choice for the holidays, Dollywood. Perhaps the only woman in entertainment or in the world who has their own theme park. But I want to pick up on a point that you raised, Helen, about it feeling weird to criticize Dolly as a fan. And I want to share a couple of criticisms. Jad, I'll give these to you. Jeffrey here says, Perhaps it's not a criticism, actually, so I'll take that back. But Jeffrey says, I like that her mass appeal is something she's very protective of. Would it be nice for her to speak out against Trump? Yes, sure. But I can name few other artists that are so beloved by Red and Blue America. All people are represented in sharing space in the audience of her shows. And one more I'll give you from Dan, who says the most recent episode of the podcast explores Dolly's politics. And it's remarkable to see how she's been a champion of progressive values while remaining above the partisan fray. It's not simply a calculated stance to maintain her appeal to the broadest possible audience. So these two people tweeting made it sound like a good thing that she is above the political fray, but there are other people online who have issues with that. What do you make of that criticism, that she should be more outspoken?
I mean, it's a really interesting and very like unresolvable thing with Dolly. I mean, she's risen to the stature where we expect her to speak out about things we might not expect other entertainers to address, and she won't go there. And I think that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I mean, she is defiantly apolitical, particularly when it comes to President Trump. I mean, I think she knows that is just a fault line that divides America. And any president, and Shima and I witnessed this again and again. Anytime a reporter would bring up President Trump, she would shut them down. And it is an interesting question, like, should she speak out about President Trump? I mean, I think those on the left would say, absolutely, how could you remain silent? That's unconscionable. But certainly if she were to speak out, she would lose her fans, or many of them on the right. And there is something that I agree with in the comments you just shared, that to maintain that apolitical stance is actually a choice. It's not avoiding something. It's not saying I'm not going to address this. It's an ethos in itself. It is saying I will simply not cast out one side or the other. And so it feels almost like a spiritual stance in a way, in addition to being simultaneously a business decision. So it's kind of both at the same time, and that's what makes it kind of interesting and uncomfortable. But I personally find it refreshing, to be honest.
I think also a lot of it comes from this idea of she does not abandon a human being. And even someone who is perceived as a bully, in a room where they are being bullied, she won't jump on that wagon. She won't do it. She's really living kindness to the best of her ability. And one thing that was interesting about the Dollitics episode is I come from a stance where I think, say you're a feminist and protest in the street and get arrested every Friday. That's my ethos. But Dolly taught me a lot about, what do you do if your family dinner is divided? This is something she's living in her daily life. It's not just what she's doing with the public eye. Her group of friends and her family is heterogeneous. A lot of the women that are amazing feminist icons like Gloria Steinem, Jane Fonda we spoke to, they have nothing to lose by being liberal. Their group, the people that feed them, it's pretty, they have a lot of the same similar political views. So I find Dolly's stance really refreshing and also just interesting for me to self-reflect on. People get to do whatever they want to do. She's doing what she wants to do. She loves Jane Fonda, and I know she has opinions behind the scenes, but I don't think she wants to throw those on people. She wants people to figure it out for themselves. She's an independent thinker.
Right.
But even if she doesn't enter party politics, one of the things that I think the podcast brings out so well is that she's very strong on certain political issues. So she always stands up for the LGBTQ community, well before it was popular to do so. And the other thing that she's quite radical on is education.
So Helen, I'm going to end you there, unfortunately, but we can tweet out more on how she's great on education. Jad, Shima, and Helen, we're out of time, unfortunately. So Dolly Parton's America is available at wnycstudios.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Before we go, we'll leave you with Esther Kankara, a Kenyan musician who shared her thoughts. Goodbye.
Musician, and I love Dolly Parton's songs. Part of why I love Dolly Parton's songs is because she mainly sings about growing up from a very humble background and beating so many odds to become whom she is today, an international superstar. I relate to that story because I also grew up from a humble background and I've overcome quite a number of challenges so that I can become